All right, this could be an interesting idea for a video. We all talk about the starting quarterbacks, but what if quarterbacks get injured? That happens sometimes. This time we are doing the top 10 backup quarterbacks, and I'm using the quarterbacks who are listed as the backup, not necessarily the quarterbacks who I believe to be the second best quarterback on the roster, because, for example, if a team had Nathan Peterman and Tom Brady on their roster, but they were going to have Peterman start, then Tom Brady would be considered the backup, even though obviously, Peterman's better than Brady, so that's a bad example, but you get the point. Top 10 backup quarterbacks, couple honorable mentions, Taylor Heinicke and Gardner Minshew did not make the list, probably make some other people's list, but not mine. Let's get into the list, starting off with number 10. Number 10, I'm going Bailey Zappe. Bailey Zappe, who at one point was listed as the starter over the guy who was currently listed as the starter for a very brief moment. In that Chicago Bears game, he was given the starting job over Mac Jones, but then the game went horribly wrong, and so they gave the job back to Jones. Who knows? Zappe could end up being a starter in this league, and I think has shown that he can be a more than capable player in a very small sample size. The small sample size hurts him a little bit, but I think he still belongs on this list for New England, so I have him at number 10. Number 9, I am going with Tyrod Taylor, a guy who, he's been a starting quarterback to get his team to the playoffs. Like, you certainly, you get some credit for that. Now, again, how much of that was his doing is a fair point to bring up. Also, the offense only scored 3 points in that playoff game against a good defense in Jacksonville. But, still, the point is that he is someone who has been able to have some success as a player. We haven't heard from him recently, and sometimes when you don't hear from someone in a while, people kind of forget about them. But he is someone who has had a pretty big sample size and has been pretty successful for several teams. And, again, famously did get benched at one point for Nathan Peterman. That maybe wasn't the best decision in hindsight. As a whole, though, spoiled my next player. Tyrod Taylor belongs on the list. But yeah, number 8, Marcus Mariota of the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles signed him this offseason. Someone who's, again, a very, I think, quality player who has shown some real flashes. I saw the first time he showed some real flashes in person. I was at that. This is an unrelated story, but kind of a funny one, is that Mariota and Jameis Winston played each other week 1 of the season when they, right after they first got drafted. And so my dad and I kind of said, hey, game's in Tampa, let's just go see, 2 players who are, at least one of them should end up being like a great player, right? They went first and second overall. Well, not exactly. Both are, backups at this point. But for Mariota, again, someone who I think has shown some real flashes in the NFL, the consistency just isn't there for him. And the lows are, can be prolonged with Mariota. So that's why he's at number 8. Still a very good backup, though. Number 7, Davis Mills of the Houston Texans. So I've really liked what I've seen from him. Now, again, I don't know if he's a starting caliber player. Only a few of these guys, really, I think only 2 of these guys, I would say, have an argument to be made as like a top 32 quarterback in the league and someone who you could consider starting on your team if you're not paying them a ton. I don't know if Davis Mills is that, but he's, again, shown some real flashes, and maybe he, out of these players, has the, most upside, potentially. Him and Zappe being a lot of, kind of the younger guys, potentially he could continue to get better and become a starting caliber player, although it's not going to be in Houston because they just drafted C.J. Stroud. Number 6, Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater I have on this list, which I think it's fair to say it didn't go great last year for Bridgewater. It just didn't. Last year, I don't know what happened, because I thought that would be a pretty good situation. Like, when he had to go in for Miami, I was kind of sitting there saying, it's going to work out. He's going to be fine. Like, this is actually, I don't think it's going to be that big of a drop. And well, I don't know if it was as bad of a disaster as some people made it out to be. It wasn't great when he was out there. Small sample size, though. I've still seen him play a lot of, quality football. So I'm still going to say that he is a, not quite a top 5 backup, but pretty close. Next on the list is another Houston Texans backup. They actually have 2 backups on this list. So they're pretty good backup quarterback position-wise. I think they wanted a veteran in case Keenum to help out C.J. Stroud. I like Keenum. Again, a guy who's played in the conference championship. Can't say that about a lot of the players on this list. He's, again, how much of that was his doing is a fair thing to bring up. He barely played last year for the Bills. He was with the Bills last year, only had 8 yards. Played a little bit in 2021 with the Browns, and I thought was solid there. And I think he's someone who's kind of, to me, basically what you would want as a backup quarterback. He's someone who can get the most out of your team, but he's never going to really go above and beyond. He's not a playmaker. And also, that one year with Minnesota, there was also just kind of a lot of like luck that went into it, I thought. A lot of sort of, he threw up a lot of jump balls to Stephon Diggs and to Adam Thielen, who bailed him out a ton. And there were like a dozen dropped interceptions that year, it felt like, for Keenum. So, while he's a good player, obviously not someone who's going to drag his team kicking and screaming to a conference championship, but still someone who is, I would say, a top 5 backup. Number 4, give me Mitchell Trubisky. I think Trubisky's a player who, he's pretty consistently been a top 32 quarterback in the NFL. Now, there might be 32 quarterbacks I would take over him this year, but that's just because there's a lot of rookies coming in, guys who I expect to get better, stuff like that. But he's someone, you could argue that he's a top 32 quarterback in this league for sure. I do feel like he's a bit underrated because obviously he got overdrafted, and when you get overdrafted, you're going to get criticism. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, though, and I do think that if you were a team trying to, be one of those teams that says, okay, let's not pay the quarterback position any money and let's try to win a Super Bowl that way, he's someone you could consider, although I think I like him better as a backup, like how Pittsburgh is currently using him. But yeah, I think he's a quality player. I'll put him at 4. Next up is Jameis Winston, which, he's still on the Saints roster currently. He will be backing up Derek Carr. So Carr and Mariota, or excuse me, not Carr, Winston and Mariota both make this list. I do think, one thing that's worth mentioning is, I know the past couple years we haven't seen much from him with New Orleans, but he is someone who, he was hurt both those years. Yeah, sure, he had, 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last year, but I kind of feel the same way I feel about him after 2021, where 2021, he looked very good in a small sample size. 2022, he didn't look very good in a small sample size. That's who Winston is to a T. He's someone who, while, Case Keenum will come in and just be a steady player, Winston's the kind of guy where if you lose your quarterback in the playoffs, he's someone who could absolutely go on a run and have 3 great games and win you a Super Bowl. That's in the cards. I'm not saying that would happen, just that's a possibility of happening. He has won a passing title in this league. He had over 5,000 yards in a 16 game season. Now, he threw 30 interceptions that year, so maybe he doesn't quite get the credit that other players would get for it, but still, there's some things to like about Winston, and so that's why I have him here at number 3. Another guy who basically every year he's been in the league, he's had a top 32 quarterbacks season, right? He just has, when it's bad, it's awful. So number 3 for Winston. Number 2, the Carolina Panthers got Andy Dalton. So went from a Saints player to a former Saints player. I thought Dalton played pretty well last year, actually. I think that people it wasn't perfect. There were some rough spots, but as a whole, I thought that it was a positive performance from Dalton. And he is someone who, I don't know if we're ever going to get Cincinnati Bengals Andy Dalton again, especially, he had that one MVP candidate year for Cincinnati. That was kind of a career year. Since the talent around him is kind of, he hasn't quite had those teams, really. Always had some good teams that he's played for, like the Cowboys team. It hasn't quite been as good, but it hasn't been a disaster either. He's a quality, quarterback, and I would say a top 32 quarterback in the NFL, although I kind of do like how Carolina is using him just as a veteran guy to help out Bryce Young. And number 1, I'm going Jacoby Brissett, who I think I would actually kind of predict him to be the week 1 starter. I know that currently everywhere I see it listed, Sam Howell is the week 1 starter. So I have to put Brissett on the list. Brissett was actively good last year. He was someone who's, he's had several good years as a quarterback. Again, it's kind of one of those things where, who wants to actually take the chance to give you a year starting? That's where things get a little bit tough. But maybe Washington is that team, and maybe they can kind of capture some of the magic that we saw Seattle capture with Geno Smith. Now, again, Smith was great last year. Smith was also kind of a complete wild card. Brissett has shown a lot more going into this season than Geno Smith had shown heading into last season. So, starter potential, but if he's a backup, he's my number 1 backup quarterback in the NFL. What do you disagree with? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.